In the same week that BlackRock announced their intentions to launch an ETF in Europe, another $811 billion giant has made their Bitcoin plan extremely clear. The head of this central bank of this country we're talking about today just said, quote, they will not buy Bitcoin under any circumstances. This comes only 8 weeks after a presidential candidate from Poland announced that he would create a strategic Bitcoin reserve if elected. Is there a power struggle happening in the EU as we see countries like the Czech Republic move to embrace Bitcoin, but countries like Italy, France, and now Poland attack it? Why would BlackRock be launching an ETF in the region if Bitcoin appears so out of favor there? What is BlackRock seeing behind the scenes in Europe that no one else is paying attention to? Before we jump into today's show, I want to bring up my legendary co-host, who's always optimistic, the one, the only, Optimus Fields. By the way, this power struggle isn't just happening in Europe, it's happening in the United States as well. There was just a congressional testimony. Cynthia Lummis was involved, and it looks like that same power struggle that's happening in Europe is happening in the United States as well. Here's a clip.
Concerns me a lot is the idea that we would even look like China in any way. So can I have your commitment that as long as you're the chairman of the Federal Reserve System, that we will never have a central bank digital currency?
Yes.
Thank you for that. I think that's extremely important. That makes me very happy.
Take a look at his shoulders. Like, that doesn't sound very believable. So we all have to remember what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, where we are in the movie. Essentially, governments have been using their ability to print money as a funding mechanism for a very, very long time. Governments don't produce anything. Their only way of raising revenue is through taxation. The problem that they have is that direct taxation is unpopular. Obviously, people don't want to pay a percentage of their paycheck, so they can only raise that tax so high. So what do they do instead? Well, they tax via currency debasement. And they've always had that privilege. They've had that monopoly for a very long time until Bitcoin. Bitcoin comes along, and Bitcoin continues to prove that money can exist without inflation. And the uncomfortable part is that inflation, currency debasement, is how a lot of these governments fund themselves. So eventually something's going to come to head. And eventually what I think Bitcoin is going to do is it's going to expose incentives, and it's going to make governments have to answer. Why is inflation necessary? Why is a central bank necessary? Why is this all happening? And I don't think they're up to the task. And now that they've lost their monopoly, their control over information, now that the internet has enabled mass scale peer-to-peer communications, they're going to have an even harder time convincing the public to use their money, to convince the public that, you know what, inflation is necessary, that currency debasement is just a fact of life, that, you know, Bitcoin is not money, Bitcoin is a commodity. They're going to have a hard time convincing the public of those truths. So we're going to continue to see this as the separation of money and state continues to accelerate. Here is the article I want to talk about today. Polish presidential candidate pledges strategic Bitcoin reserve if elected. The presidential candidate for Poland's Radical Right Confederation Party has pledged that if elected, he would turn the country into a cryptocurrency haven and create a, quote, strategic Bitcoin reserve. On November 17th, Mencen took to X to promise the creation of the Bitcoin reserve similar to the one proposed by now U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Trump pledged to make his country the crypto capital of the world and to also create a Bitcoin strategic reserve. It goes on to say, Mencen in his post on X, quote, now I am running for president of Poland, and I propose that Poland should keep part of its currency reserves in Bitcoin. If I become the president of Poland, our country will become a cryptocurrency haven with very friendly regulations, low taxes, and a supportive approach from banks and regulators. Metzen himself owns 33.7 Bitcoin, worth nearly $3 million at current prices. He said he bought the cryptocurrency in 2013 when it was priced close to $600. In a separate X post, Metzen highlighted that he has consistently argued in favor of Bitcoin. He recalled how, when running for the mayor of the northern Polish city of Turin in 2018, he had proposed that municipal offices and schools should be used to mine Bitcoin, with the heat generated being used to warm buildings. Bitcoin mining, and it continues to talk about Bitcoin mining, and it says on this part, quote, freeing cryptocurrencies is one of the planks of Metzen's electoral program. In it, he pledged to, quote, ensure that Poland has the most cryptocurrency-friendly law in the entire EU, thanks to which we will become a European hub for companies in the industry. Confederation is a federation of 3 political parties encompassing economic liberties, led by Metzen, as well as nationalist conservatives and traditional value Catholics. So it goes on to say it won just over 7% of the last vote out of 18 of 460 parliamentary seats in 2023. Now, what I'll tell everybody is, again, our job as, people that are single issue voters, really, that really believe that you fix the money, you fix the world, that a lot of the political issues that we see in the world today come from broken money. Our job is to move the Overton window. Right? If I told you 4 years ago that the president of the United States was going to be a pro-Bitcoin president, you wouldn't have believed me. If I told you 4 years ago that there is talk of a strategic Bitcoin reserve in the United States, you would not have believed me. If I told you 4 years ago that a huge portion of U.S. states are moving forward with strategic Bitcoin legislation, you would not have believed me. So we've done a tremendous job in moving the Overton window. But let's not lose sight of what our goal here is. Our goal is simple. We have to end central banking, the tyranny of central banking. It has stolen the opportunity of our generation. If you're a millennial, if you're a Gen Zer, the reason you can't afford housing, the reason you can't afford a future, the reason that you can't even think about retirement is because of broken money. It's currency debasement. What they did in 2008 was a crime. What they did during the pandemic, where they increased the money supply by 40%, that's just stealing. Like, we have to be very, very blunt and honest with what debasement is, what money printing is. It's theft. It is a form of taxation. And what we're witnessing in Poland, we're also witnessing here in the United States. You see Powell kind of shrugging his shoulders like, do you promise not to, roll out a CBDC? He's like, no. Yeah, he doesn't have a choice but to say that. But, he would love to do that, because that would mean a continuation of the central bank system. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. Wake up. This is the separation of money and state, and you guys have front row seats to all of this. Now, what's beautiful about this, guys, is that we have Bitcoin. We have this totally decentralized protocol, and it doesn't require any politician to be elected for you to start benefiting from Bitcoin today. All you have to do is opt out. You buy Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, mine Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into cold storage, and that's it. You are now starting to live a deflationary life. If you take a look at your net worth and you denominate your net worth in Bitcoin rather than fiat, you'll see that everything around you gets progressively cheaper over time. And Jeff Booth makes the case that that's the way that the world should work. It's only because government's manipulation of money that the world is inflationary. Think about all the advances we've had in technology and productivity over the last 20 years. I mean, the fact that we literally have a supercomputer in our hands, the ability to call anyone around the world instantaneously, instant communication, like the fact that we can travel halfway across the world and it only takes like half a day or so. I mean, technology has advanced tremendously. Essentially, the introduction of the internet, or like the rise of the internet, the popularity of the internet, things have changed dramatically. Why is it that the younger generations are poorer than our parents? And the answer for that is broken money. And anyone who's really fighting against this change, against this pivotal change, is really basically saying that they would want a continuation of the legacy system. They want a continuation of a system that essentially steals from the lower and middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets, and it's a wealth redistribution mechanism to the very wealthy and back to the government. That's essentially the racket. That's the scheme. That is central banking. And Bitcoin gives us an opportunity to opt out. But one of the awesome parts about Bitcoin, one of the hidden features about Bitcoin that I absolutely adore, that I don't see a lot of people talk about, is that Bitcoin exposes incentives. So these central bankers and governments, in the process of them trying to stop Bitcoin in order to retain their privilege of being able to print money, they're going to expose themselves in the process. And that's exactly what's happening. And you can connect the dots. You can connect this with what's happening with Doge in the United States, which is extremely exciting. So essentially, Elon is going in to a lot of these federal agencies and he's auditing them. And a lot of these federal agencies, including judges, are trying to stop him. And you got to ask yourself, like, if you get audited by the government and if you don't comply with that audit, you go to jail. The government is basically trying to make, or better said, elements of the government is trying to make the case that if you don't comply, if you don't comply with an audit, you go to jail. If we don't comply to an audit, it's a danger to democracy if we comply to that audit. I mean, this is a government that's supposed to be by the people, for the people. They work for us. We fund them with our tax dollars. What do they have to hide, right? And I think what they found so far, the amount of fraud that's been happening, the amount of tax dollars that has been going to absolute waste, is insanity. And the argument that I'll have to say about that is, like, look, that's always going to happen. And even if Elon is successful, and I think he will, I mean, the guy, like, literally invented a self-landing rocket, self-driving cars. Like, don't bet against Elon. That's my opinion. I know Opti disagrees with that. But even if Elon is successful, we're just one administration away from all of that being reversed. So the only viable long-term solution to all of this is, again, put the money back in the hands of the people. We need a sound money system. We need a money that cannot be manipulated for the benefits of the elites at the expense of the many. That's what we need. That's what Bitcoin fixes. So very tumultuous times, but very exciting times, and we have front row seats for the separation of money and state. Anyways, Opti, do you like my HIVE jacket, man? I mean, my HIVE vest? It's super fly. Shout out to Nathan and shout out to Frank Holmes from HIVE. I love it. I love the HIVE merch. Opti, what are you wearing? What are you wearing, brother? You got some nice merch on today.
I'm wearing that Silk Road Anonymous Market. You know, shouts out to Jack Mahlers and shouts out to Ross Ulbricht. I had to cop one. They're comfy. It's really comfy hoodie. Anyways, before I move on to my take on this stuff, Nico's wearing a vest now. So, you know, we've officially been assimilated by TradFi. Here we are, guys.
we're becoming the people. We're becoming the people we're fighting against.
Oh, man.
Anyways, guys, smash that like button. Help us break 100 likes within the first let's say 20 minutes of the show. Also, shout out to the 1,400 of you guys watching live between YouTube and X. And of course, shout out to our Rumble audience as well. Guys, smash the like button. You guys are listening to Simply Bitcoin Live. Opti, what's your take on this, man? It's crazy, bro. This is heating up. It's like the fiat forces, the forces of slavery, versus the forces of Bitcoin, versus the forces of freedom. But what's really interesting, bro, is that they're starting to run out of excuses. Like, they don't really have justifications. They don't really have reasons as to why this waste is happening. Like, they just gaslight. Like, they're just saying, no, this is a threat to democracy. Like, Elon has access to all this stuff. Just Bitcoin is bad. Bitcoin can't be money. Like, they're running out of reasons. I think it was Max Kaiser that originally said this, but their excuses are suffering from inflation themselves.
Yeah, totally. 100%. And really, like, looking into a lot of the excuses that these central bankers have against Bitcoin, or even institutional managers have against Bitcoin, their main knock right now is it's too volatile. You know, like, they're saying there's no stability in the Bitcoin network, and Nika's messing up the stream, and it's just becoming very obvious. We actually, my favorite example of this is that Nobel laureate winner who did this whole report about how Bitcoin can't be used as money, and if it continues to work, then we're gonna have to reevaluate monetary history and monetary theory. And all of us Bitcoiners is like, man, it's so obvious Bitcoin is working, and you guys are just so invested in your degrees and your accolades that it's very hard for you to kind of wrap your head around what's going on. And what I think we're seeing in the EU is further like instances of this happening. We're seeing, of course, Christine Lagarde from the ECB. She's constantly kind of fudding and downplaying Bitcoin, though in the same week that Christine Lagarde came out against Bitcoin, we saw that the Czech Republic, their national bank or central bank, is talking about adding Bitcoin to the reserves. Now the president is talking about they're going to do a study around this. And now we're seeing that in Poland, something very similar is going on, that their central banker comes out and says basically Bitcoin is useless, we're never going to touch it. And then people within the country are like, actually, we should probably start to embrace Bitcoin. And of course, this all comes after the fact that it seems like the Trump administration is going to, in some way or form, embrace Bitcoin. Obviously, we don't have a time limit here. We don't really have a time horizon here. We just know that they are embracing it. A lot of people are kind of, being maybe a little more cynical and saying that this is just a lot of rhetoric and they're just kind of talking past us. But I think it is a lot more dire than people would like to lead on. I'm a Bitcoiner, so I have my bias here. But from what my vantage point, it's becoming very clear that the traditional financial system, whether it's the Fed or the president or all nation states around the world and institutional managers around the world, they have to look for an alternative. And obviously, we think the alternative is Bitcoin. And so they're being forced by economic forces and incentives to, at the very least, either embrace Bitcoin or, maybe not just FUD Bitcoin so much, kind of being a little more lenient around Bitcoin. And as I've always said, as long as Bitcoin can get out of the door and they don't attack our industry and try to hamper the industry or, a la Choke Point 2.0, Bitcoin's going to win. And I think the incentives are playing out in real time. And a lot of people's narratives around Bitcoin are changing right now. It's no longer just some internet nerd money. I say this like constantly. It's no longer just relegated to the dark corners of the internet like we played yesterday. Now people are talking about adding Bitcoin to their retirements. Now we're seeing the BlackRocks of the world try to usher in more ETFs and try to get their fees off of Bitcoin. So they're embracing Bitcoin. And as much as they do one thing and say the other, just look at what their actions are. If they're continuously trying to make Bitcoin products and they are looking into Bitcoin, then that just goes to show that a lot of the things we say here on the show, even though we are 45 IQ, we're still way ahead of the game. And all you really have to do is just continue to stack Bitcoin. So I absolutely love to see central bankers kind of grovel around Bitcoin, because it just goes to show that we know what we're doing here. And this is the very point. I am against central banks. Central banks are the cause of all of the problems in the world. The fact that it can create money out of thin air, the fact that they've indebted every country basically in the world by printing money out of thin air. What's the quote you always say, Nika? Creating a money that another man can work for free. And this is what we all consider the status quo. Now there's a new option. And I think the next decade, probably the next 2 decades, is going to be very interesting to see how Bitcoin conquers the world and how Bitcoin starts to proliferate around the world. And I think by the end of this year, we're going to see more signs of that, because I think Bitcoin's going to have a good run by the end of this year. And the cope that we're going to see from people trying to do mental gymnastics about why Bitcoin is in the 6 figures plus and why it's going to 7 figures, it's just going to be so glorious. The normie tears and the normie salt, it's going to taste so much better, considering how much they've hated on us and how much FUD they've thrown at us and how many arguments we've had to counter to continue to spread the truth that Bitcoin will help you. And I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I was watching the Jack Cruz and Robert Breedlove interview, episode 2. And I was just thinking about everyone here that listens to us, shows up to us. And my main takeaway was like, man, we want you guys to be wealthy. We want you guys to be healthy. And if us coming out here and just continuing to confirm your bias allows you to live a better life, then I think Nico and I are doing our job here. And this is what we want for everyone on YouTube and on Rumble and on Twitter is if you're new to Bitcoin, we want you guys to get the source. We want to get you guys to what we believe is the truth. And so you can actually live a better life. And we do kind of acquire more influence around the world. And I think this is happening in real time. The fact that central bankers are talking about the stuff we talk about, you know, we have Jerome Powell saying he's never going to create a CBDC. Whether they do or not, I think is besides the point. The fact they're talking about this just goes to show we are memeing this stuff into reality, and you just love to see it.
100%. This is getting memed into reality 1,000,000%. I love the way that you phrase that. But that shoulder, you know, do you see that? Opti, like he wasn't having it. He was like, nah, it's not going to happen. I mean, we're winning. If that's not us winning, I don't know what is. Anyways, guys, today's going to be a jam-packed show. We're going to talk more about Elon potentially auditing the Federal Reserve, and apparently he is tapping on Ron Paul to do that. I mean, crazy stuff that's happening. And also more information coming out of this whole USAID debacle. Apparently Nayib Bukele is talking about it. The All In podcast is talking about it. I mean, look, the only long-term solution to all this, guys, I keep telling you this, like the administrative state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, essentially, what that is, it's not a conspiracy. It's just the unelected bureaucracy that remains in power regardless of who's in office. And essentially what tends to happen is that bureaucracy continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's fed by the money printer. And because it doesn't produce anything, it's not a company, it doesn't have feedback. If a company does something wrong, or if they make bad decisions, they go out of business. The free market essentially punishes them. But if the government makes bad decisions, because they have a money printer, they don't have any type of feedback whatsoever. It's just, they can just keep going, right? So it creates this like very, very encumbering bureaucracy that of course the people have to pay for. And if it's not via direct taxation, it's via taxation, via monetary debasement. So we're going to talk about all of that stuff today. It's going to be a great show. If you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Before we jump into it, I do want to give a shout out to, of course, our lead sponsor, the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack, bitcoinwell.com. Enable your independence today by going to Bitcoin Well, which is the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on-chain or via the Lightning Network in Canada and the USA. What makes Bitcoin Well different than all the other platforms, which is why we personally recommend it here at Simply Bitcoin, is that it's a completely non-custodial platform. What does that mean? That means that when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. It doesn't even give you the ability to leave the funds on the exchange. If you're a higher net worth individual looking to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more, check out their Bitcoin Well Infinite product. It's a white glove service tailored for transactions of $50,000 worth of Bitcoin or more. So if you want a personal representative of which you can call or text anytime you want to buy Bitcoin, check out Bitcoin Well Infinite today. And if you're an American, you can now get paid in Bitcoin sent directly to your personal Bitcoin wallet address. Share your Bitcoin Well direct deposit details with your employer, set your Bitcoin/dollar split, and receive sats instead of fiat with every paycheck. What are you waiting for? Go to bitcoinwell.com today, and if you use promo code SIMPLYBTC, you get 3 tosses into the wishing well, absolutely free. All right, everybody, let's hit the numbers. We have tons to talk about today. Let's check it out. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, StampSeed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? StampSeed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates
instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on StampSeed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store. Head over to stampseed.com today.
All right, everybody, scan the QR code on your screen right now, and you can go to stampseed.com, use promo code SIMPLY, get 15% off. I was kind of playing around with the text. I don't like it, Opti. I like the default better. Anyways, at the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $96,050. Block height, 883,331. Sats per dollar, 1,041. Market cap, 1.9 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 9.28%. Percentage issued, 94.39%. Decline from all-time high. Negative 12%. Check this out, Opti. This is why the central bankers are having absolute panic attacks. The realized monetary inflation rate of Bitcoin is currently at 1%. It's on the verge of going below 1%. When we started covering that, Opti, remember? I think it was at like 2 something.
No, it was higher. It was like 3.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. Absolute scarcity. We're going to continue covering this just because it compares and contrasts with fiat currencies. Like fiat currencies, they're trying to get it back to 2. I don't think they'll be able to. I think the new inflation rate is going to be 3, but Bitcoin is just, it's going to go down forever. It's just going to go down forever. The longer Bitcoin exists, the longer the stronger the argument that money can exist without inflation. And if money can exist without inflation, governments they're going to have a hard time justifying why people should be forced, essentially, to use money that is designed to lose purchasing power. They're going to have a hard time convincing the public on that. Anyways, so let's talk about essentially all the things that have been happening over the last week or so. I'll tee it up. Here's Shamath. Essentially breaking it down from the All In podcast, breaking it down what's happening in terms of why is Opti laughing?
This is below my line.
I don't know what that means, but anyways, here's Shamath from the All In podcast, and he's talking about the whole debacle that was happening with the whole USAID, everything that's happening. Let's check out the clip, and then we have some other things to share, and then Opti and I will talk about it.
The media, who are supposed to be this intermediary layer that's totally objective between the government and the people, were not independent at all, but had all kinds of hidden incentives. $8 million to Politico, several $1 million to the BBC. I think it's important to ask what's going on. And by the way, that also has historical context. This is exactly what happened in the 60s and 70s, where it turned out that record companies were paying DJs to play songs. There was a huge set of lawsuits and trial cases, and the result was a change in the law, right? And we call that payola now, which is you cannot take this money without disclosing it. And so had this money been absorbed by these entities and actually disclosed, maybe we'd be okay. But Nick, I sent you a link. Maybe you can throw it on the screen for these guys. This is a very simple manifestation of this cycle. We talked about this, guys, and we didn't realize how connected it all was. But we were asking ourselves during the election cycle last year, why are all these articles buried? Why aren't we really getting the truth? And it turns out that the people who were responsible for telling the truth, somewhere along the chain, were cajoled or just told not to tell the truth, influenced by all of this back channel money that was going back and forth from the government to these folks?
Okay. Yeah, let me just give some numbers to what you were referencing there. The USAID organization has been giving money, as have other agencies, to journals, databases, and subscriptions. There's probably some amount of that makes sense. However, when we look at this, during Trump 1, spend on Politico was averaging around 1.3 million a year, but it suddenly ballooned up to 8 million a year under Biden. And you can see the quarterly payments here on this chart. So there's some normal amount of spend on publications or for a library at an organization. And so what we're looking here is all federal agencies. And suddenly during Biden, there is a very suspicious ramp up in spend to Politico. All of this is breaking. A lot of this hasn't been verified yet. So we'll put that caveat on it. And then there is a number of 34 million that's been floating around. That's all years back to 2008, not just 2024, lest people have that number juxtaposed or misattributed.
So that's absolutely crazy, right? I think about it. Like, a lot of these publications that are supposed to be independent were essentially being paid by the government, which kind of misaligns incentives. There's a clear conflict of interest. They're incentivized not to, why would they speak ill about people that are paying them? Like, if you think about it for a second, right? Like, it's a total misalignment of incentives. And then I came to a lot of realizations, right, when a lot of this news broke. The first one was, did you remember how the New York Times was releasing essentially all these hit pieces on Bitcoin? Like, of course, the really famous one where, they changed this image, and Pierre Richard made a video, and it's called The Real World Costs of the Digital Race of Bitcoin. And what's really funny, too, is resubscribe to support independent journalism. we now know that the government was paying them. By definition, that's not independent journalism, which I find super ironic, but it kind of makes sense. It makes sense now why all these hit pieces were being released. And again, it's not just us noticing this. Here's Nayib Bukele, of course, the Bitcoin president, in El Salvador. And he said that today, the entire local opposition called for a massive demonstration against mining. Every political party joined the call, along with 90% of all NGOs, universities, churches, and activist groups. They ran a month-long mainstream media and social media campaign, had the backing of the country's most powerful news outlets, chose a holiday so no one had to work, organized preparatory events, and more. This is what they achieved. It's clear there is no opposition without USAID money. Check that out. It's no one. So my question is, was this actually, was the news that was being covered by the New York Times, actually really news? Was there really opposition in El Salvador? Or, was this actually being paid for by the U.S. federal government under an administration that was extremely hostile towards Bitcoin? Extremely revealing, this entire thing. And then this leads me to my final point. This is Jeffrey Tucker, because essentially where the thing is right now with Elon and Doge and all the stuff that he's uncovering, the latest update is that a federal judge essentially has determined that the Trump administration is violating his order lifting the blanket spending freeze on federal agent programs. So essentially, a federal judge is freezing or is stopping the Trump administration from freezing all these programs and the Trump administration from going in there with Doge. And I think it leads to a very important question. If the American people voted on the Trump administration to do all the things that he promised he was going to do, Elon was campaigning with him, who's really in power? Is it the unelected bureaucracy, or is it the person that is the person that we supposedly elected? Who's actually running the government? And then this leads Jeffrey Tucker to make a very important point. the Supreme Court is going to have to rule soon on if there can be an actual president elected by the people, or if this whole voting thing is just a fake veneer covering a permanent government. And I think that's an extremely important point. So to kind of summarize everything, right? We're discovering that all these media outlets that have been hostile towards Bitcoin over these last couple of years have been paid by the government the entire time. We're also discovering too that auditing, a lot of these agencies is a danger to democracy. We're also discovering that despite Trump winning in a landslide and his party essentially winning the House and the Senate, judges could still step in and say, you know what, actually, you can't audit those agencies. You can't freeze the spending. So why are we voting? And we don't actually have a say on where our tax dollars go? Oh, and they also get to tax our money because they can just print as much as they want. What is that but not tyranny? What is that but not a tyrannical system? Give me another definition of it. And then that kind of explains why they were so hell-bent on censorship, why they were so hell-bent on getting rid of Bitcoin, why they were so hell-bent on attacking the industry. I think it was because it was a clear and present danger to their racket, to put it bluntly, because that's what it is. Like the fact that we can't audit agencies in the government that supposedly work for us, but they can audit us. And if we don't comply with their audits, there's consequences to that. I mean, that is not what we've been sold on. That wasn't the contract. That wasn't the deal, right? So yeah, I mean, this is a crazy, crazy world, but I'm going to give it a Bitcoiner's perspective because I think you guys have been hearing all of this coverage from, I'm sure, a lot of other, commenters and content creators. But we're different here at Simply Bitcoin because we're actually going to give you guys a solution, right? Because the general solution is vote harder, daddy. Voting is important. I'm not trying to take away from it, but the solution here is fixing the money. The solution here is opting out of the system entirely. That's the solution. That's going to have an immediate benefit for your life. That's going to have an immediate, it's going to change your life immediately without you having to wait for, the political showdown to happen and the political, fight to, play out the way it will. You don't have to wait. You could adopt Bitcoin now and you could start living a deflationary life today without having to ask anybody for permission. All you got to do is buy, earn, mine Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into self-custody, and that's it. Just wait. Literally, just wait. Just low time preference. And everything around you will get progressively cheaper. Housing, food, your expenses. And this is something that I was talking to Lawrence Lepard yesterday, and he wrote a book recently called The Big Print. And essentially, the world has been psyoped into thinking that somehow inflation is necessary in order for money to function. And that is a lie. And that is a scam. And that's what Bitcoiners, that's our mission, to really wake up people to that reality and to wake up people to the reality that it's not a left or right, debate or discussion. Regardless of the political party in power, they both fundamentally do the same thing. It's a popularity contest over the money printer. We have to wake up people to the reality that, hey guys, voting isn't going to solve this. Opting out and using better money is going to solve this. And that's why, Marty's famous phrase, and Lawrence is using it too. That's why that phrase is so powerful and so true at the same time. Fix the money, fix the world. Because broken money has fundamentally broken the world. And all this fraud and all this, misrepresentation and all these lies, if you pay attention, if you go down and try to find what the root cause of it is, it's very simple. It's broken money, and the broken money comes from the government's ability to create money for free that everyone else has to work for. And that's in stark contrast to what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is an equal system. If you're a president, an emperor, a king, it doesn't matter. If you want to make more Bitcoin, you have to mine it just like everybody else. And if you don't mine it, you have to buy it or you have to earn it. It's a system of there's no special privileges in that system. What the proponents of fiat are advocating for is a system of privileges. A system of privileges and control. And there has to be a system of control because it's a system based on theft. So people following their incentives wouldn't willingly use a system based on theft. They have to be coerced into using that said system. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on this, bro? Because it's given us a ton to talk about. And it's a scandal, man. What's happening with this USAID, I know you're not a big fan of Musk, but what's happening with this USAID stuff, man, is I think we all knew it was happening, but just discovering the facts and seeing the data, it's surprising nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, well, two things can be true here for me personally. You know, I am obviously skeptical of Elon Musk in a lot of the things that he does, but I am also for what Doge is doing as well. I think it's very good to kind of eliminate the waste in the federal government because as someone that kind of came into Bitcoin very apolitical, and as I've kind of grown up and matured and realized who the big boogeyman is, it kind of forces you to, at the very least, become more political in my thinking and, you know, the content that I'm digesting. This is the game right now, and everything revolves around politics. Even if we don't want to be political, politics runs our lives. And so again, I think personally there's two things that are true for me. I am obviously skeptical of a lot of things Elon Musk does, but I'm very, you know, I'm okay with the things that they're doing with Doge, especially with this USAID stuff. Now, am I surprised with this? Ever since this news came out, honestly, I've been kind of maybe cynical about it. I'm like, didn't everyone already know this stuff was going on? Now, obviously, we have the data and the receipts, and you can kind of pinpoint and watch where the money is flowing. But this seems so obvious to me. But again, to a lot of people out there, maybe they're not far down the rabbit hole or quote unquote conspiracy theorists like a lot of people or a lot of us Bitcoiners might be, even though it's hard to be a conspiracy theorist, as Jack Cruz always says, when there's patents and there's historical facts that back up all this stuff. And it's a good little moniker to kind of downplay the truth because people don't want to hear it. And this is one of those points, I think, where as Bitcoiners, we've been talking about for a long time that the money printer backs a lot of these really bad narratives that are completely detached from reality. And now we have the actual smoking guns to show that, yeah, this is exactly the case that's going on, that the U.S. government puts a lot of money towards things that probably the average person doesn't want or doesn't agree with, but we are just constantly bombarded with these narratives and people kind of fall for the manufactured consent. And here we are where this stuff is coming out, though, again, kind of being a little skeptical about it. It seems like a lot of people, even in the face of seeing all of this truth or these facts or however you want to call it, are still just completely ignoring this story because it's coming from Elon Musk, you know? And I'm not that type of person. Like, yo, I think Elon Musk is doing some good things. And on that same, you know, flip side of the coin, I can kind of be skeptical of what he's doing. But a lot of people will just completely ignore this stuff because it comes from Musk, because it comes from Trump. And I've always been someone that I just want to know the truth. I really don't care where it comes from. Like, my whole journey has been, I want to know the truth of, or rather the nature of reality. And it doesn't matter where the stuff comes from, as long as it aligns with how I view the reality and what I think is the objective truth here. It doesn't matter where the stuff comes from. And so it is very interesting interesting to see these news stories break, to really be able to uncover and pull the veil behind the Wizard of Oz. And hey, this Doge stuff is a huge story, but it is very interesting that the corporate press still, who are literally funded by this stuff, are not talking about it. It's only people on Twitter. It's only people on social media. It's only the quote unquote, truth seekers that are talking about this stuff and making a big noise about it. So it's very interesting. As someone, I think, that came into Bitcoin and kind of just had like a vibes about it. It's like this, I had a gut feeling that this was the case. And once you understand the monetary fiat system, you understand from first principles how all of this stuff plays out. But now we have the actual facts and the connections here. And it's just interesting to see how many people will ignore this stuff just because it's coming from Elon Musk. And I think that's a detriment to themselves and obviously to the betterment of humanity moving forward. Now, there again, I am a little skeptical of the stuff that Elon Musk is doing and Elon Musk's peers coming out of the PayPal mafia. But other than that, I think people should be seeing this. And with that comes this idea of, there is some kind of, I don't want to say misdirection, but there is some spotlighting going on where, you can put a news story out so that people can kind of gobble up and be distracted with a certain news story versus actually facing and seeing what is going on. And so hopefully this is what we try to do here on Simply Bitcoin. It's like, yes, all this stuff's coming out, whether you like them or not. These are some big news stories, which are really exposing a lot of the things we've experienced in our personal lifetimes. And it all boils back down to the money. As long as they can print money, as long as they can literally manifest money from nothing to continue to push these narratives against the will of the people, this stuff's going to continue to go on. And so I'm very okay with this exposure going on. And I hope more people wake up to it and they don't just shut it out because it's not coming from, their influencer du jour here, their favorite influencer. It's like, hey, this stuff's happening. Doesn't matter where the information's coming from, but people should be aware of this. And I think this is it should be one of the biggest scandals we've seen in a long time, but hey, it's still early in 2025. Maybe some bigger stuff's going to happen this year.
I think so. I think this year is going to be wild. Anyways, guys, we're on the verge of breaking 200 likes. We're at 197 likes on YouTube. If you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Shout out to the 550 of you guys watching live on YouTube. Just jumped to 562. Shout out to the 100 of you guys watching live on Rumble. And shout out to the 1,700 of you guys watching live on X. Total live viewers, 2,340. I mean, if you add Rumble, 2,400. So shout out to all you guys. If you guys are watching Simply Bitcoin, smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you guys feel like we're providing you value. Guys, we're going to head over to the news segment of the show. We have so much to talk about regarding the, again, we're going to continue this conversation and regarding to what's happening with the administrative state, what's happening with Elon, what's happening with the potential audit of the Federal Reserve. We have a lot to talk about today, and there's this incredible article that was written, that was dropped on X, and they said something that we've said many, many times on Simply Bitcoin. And then, of course, we have the culture segment. Opti, what are we going to talk about during the culture?
Yeah, well, I have two stories. One is the Mempools are seemingly very quiet right now, and as I feel it's my duty sometimes to remind you guys to consolidate some transactions. So I'm just going to kind of cover that for a little bit, very quickly. But the interesting stuff is this story coming out of Trump eliminating the penny, and everyone's like, "This is so base." And from a Bitcoiner's perspective, I'm like, I don't know. It sounds like they're they're conceding on this idea that the currency is on the verge of hyperinflation. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a Bitcoiner here. So yeah, those are the two stories I kind of want to touch on today. Some in Bitcoin and some kind of in the popular culture.
Absolutely, guys. So we have a ton of content. Also, a live poll on YouTube. Will Bitcoin reach 500K in 2025? 323 votes so far. 59% of you guys said yes. The majority, 41% of you guys said no. Guys, we're going to hit the culture segment. We will be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Casa. Bitcoin security matters, but managing private keys can sometimes be complicated, especially multi-sig. What if you can secure your Bitcoin without worrying about losing a seed phrase or giving up custody? With Casa, you can completely control your Bitcoin with multi-key security, so even if one key is lost or stolen, your funds stay safe. No single point of failure, no stress. That's what I absolutely love about these guys. They make taking Bitcoin into self-custody incredibly easy with their best in industry user experience through their app. I've been personally recommending Casa for years now to my friends and family because they will get all the benefits of multi-key self-custody security without the hassle of having to learn complicated UI. And if you're thinking of one day passing on your Bitcoin to the next generation, their inheritance plan has you covered. Also, if you're a business looking to add Bitcoin to your treasury, do it the secure way with Casa for Business. To get started, go to casa.io today and get 5% off Casa Standard or Casa Premium with promo code SIMPLY. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They've built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
All right, everybody. Here is Opti, and Opti is beautiful, and he's holding the Passport by Foundation devices, which is more beautiful. If you use the promo code SIMPLY, you'll get a discount on this hardware wallet. Remember, guys, not your keys, not your cheese. You want to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. All right, everybody, we have a ton to talk about today, specifically regarding this news about Elon Musk tapping Ron Paul to lead a Federal Reserve audit, potentially shaking up crypto regulations. I mean, we played you guys the clip of Jerome Powell in the beginning reacting to the whole CBDC stuff, which I think was absolutely hilarious. Here's the X post itself. All aspects of the government must be fully transparent and accountable to the people, which I think is like the original agreement. I think things, they kind of changed the rules on us. No exceptions, including, if not specially, the Federal Reserve. Shot across the bow. Anyways, I ran into this amazing article. We don't have time to read the entire thing, but a great article kind of describing what's happening with Doge and what's happening with essentially the audit of a lot of these government agencies and what's really, really happening. And I found it fascinating. It's on to say the article's name is Override Inside the Revolution, Rewiring American Power. It goes on to say, in Treasury's basement, fluorescent lights hum above 4 young coders. Their screens cast blue lights across government-issued desks, illuminating energy drink cans and agency badges. As their algorithms crawled through decades of payment data, one number kept growing: 17 billion in redundant programs and counting. It goes on to say, the code had already mapped 3 subsystems. Luke Farrington's algorithms were tracing payment flows across agencies. Ethan Shoutan's analysis revealed patterns that career officials didn't even know existed. By dawn, they would understand more about Treasury's operations than the people who had worked there for decades. While career bureaucrats prepared orientation packets and welcome memos, Doge's teams were already deep inside the payment systems. No committees, no approvals, no red tapes, just 4 coders with unprecedented access and algorithms ready to run. Quote, the beautiful thing about payment systems, noted a transition official watching their screens, is that they don't lie. You can spin policy all day long, but money leaves a trail. That trail led to staggering discoveries. Programs marked as independent revealed coordinated funding streams. Grants labeled as humanitarian aid showed curious detours through complex networks. Black budgets, once shrouded in secrecy, began to unravel under algorithmic scrutiny. Now, the part I want to read you guys, which is something that we've said many times on Simply Bitcoin, right? We told you guys that the moment in history we're living through right now is the disintermediation of information, which we went through. I think we've already gone over the hill on that end. But essentially, we went through that the last decade, right? We saw that with the deplatforming of Trump. We saw that with all the censorship, the deplatforming of people off the various social media platforms, the censorship. Remember, with the pandemic, there were multiple doctors that were just completely banned off X, even though, they went to Harvard for medicine and their opinions didn't matter. The whole disinformation narrative, right? The whole Russia thing that was happening, all these narratives, So what ended up happening? What ended up happening is that the vast majority of people now consume, not the vast majority, but the majority of people now consume the news and information via social media, meaning it's mass scale peer-to-peer communications. They're consuming information directly from the source rather than a handful of media outlets, which, was just discovered, right? That, the government was funding a lot of them. It was a lot easier for the government to control the narrative when there was just a handful of media outlets. Now we know that a lot of those media outlets were funded by the government itself. But with social media, it's very difficult to control the mass narrative, right? It's kind of like this hive mind that's happening on X. It's the free marketplace of ideas, and the best ideas come to the surface. But anyways, this is a very interesting paragraph from this entire article. I found it fascinating. It says, quote, the administrative state runs on two things, a senior advisor explained, watching patterns emerge across Doge's screens. Quote, control of information and money flows. His eyes tracked new connections forming in real time. Quote, we're not just exposing their networks, we're rewriting their DNA. That is such a powerful quote, because that's essentially the case that we've been making for you guys, right? We're living through the disintermediation of information. I think we won that fight, right? Elon buying X, the rise of Nostr, the rise of independent media on YouTube, Rumble doing its thing for free speech, for video, independent content creators. And essentially the independent content creators, we are the media now. We get more views as a whole than legacy media. That's something that people forget. Legacy media gets less views than the people making content, right? So it's a completely different conversation. Now, where I think we are heading towards is what I'm trying to prepare you guys for this, is the disintermediation of money and state. And that is mentioned right here, control of information and money flows. I think as long as the government has the ability to print money out of thin air, they're going to abuse that power. It's not them. It's an architectural problem. It's a human nature problem. If you had that godlike power, because it is a godlike power, think about it. People spend, they don't call it the 9 to 5 for no reason. People spend hours and hours and hours working for money, but the government could just create that money out of nothing, right? So, of course that's going to be abused. Of course they're going to use that to benefit themselves. That's human nature. That's the genius of Satoshi. That's the genius of Bitcoin. Satoshi understood incentives, and I think he understood human nature as well. And with Bitcoin, it's simple. You're incentivized to play by the rules. And by you playing by the rules, it's benefiting not only yourself, it's also benefiting everyone else. This is where you hear Max Kaiser say stuff like, Michael Saylor is the Bitcoin employee of the year. or the Bitcoin Employee of the Month. By Michael Saylor and Larry Fink pumping their bags, they're pumping your bags too. And that's in stark contrast with how the fiat system works. The fiat system doesn't work that way. It's kind of like there's winners and there's losers. And I think the winners and losers it's very clear. The winners are the very wealthy, the extremely wealthy that have the means to save in assets. So every time the government prints money, the asset prices go through the roof. They're really getting wealthier on paper. But the lower and middle classes that are living paycheck to paycheck and they're saving and earning in fiat, they're getting robbed blind, right? But anyways, going back to this article, Elon Musk is at it again, making waves in the financial world. This time, he's eyeing Ron Paul, the former congressman known for his libertarian views, to lead an audit of the Federal Reserve. This move could have big implications for the world of cryptocurrency, potentially shaking up how it's regulated. Musk's decision has sparked a lot of talk, especially with Ron Paul's well-known stance on economic freedom and limited government. With crypto regulations already a hot topic, this development could change the game in unexpected ways. So, I mean, Opti, like, who would have thought of this timeline, brother? Reality is stranger than fiction. Ron Paul might get his wish, and the Rocket Man might be the one enabling it. Your thoughts, bro?
Well, obviously I love this. Shouts out to Ron Paul, the original OG in this Bitcoin hard money libertarian space, even though he's still not fully, a Bitcoin maxi, but he's definitely been leading the charge for longer than I've been alive. And if this actually happens, that's pretty goated. Like, if we actually get to audit the Fed, that would be absolutely incredible to see. I think the fallout after that would freaking destroy the narratives that as we know it. I think everyone would be completely shook on what is actually happening. And I mean, look, this is what Bitcoin is all about. Literally, a lot of us Bitcoiners have been saying for a long time to end the Fed, not even just audit the Fed, but end the Fed. And I think a lot of the things we're seeing right now is kind of a war between the Federal Reserve or the central banks around the world and then those people in power. So you're starting to see that if this goes through, again, as skeptical as I am on Elon Musk, I would very much applaud this new initiative to have Ron Paul audit the Fed. I think that would be incredible, and it would really be kind of a cornerstone, a shining example of just how awesome and dope Ron Paul is. He's been doing this for so long. If he ever did get the chance to audit the Fed, I think it would be a crazy, crazy end to, I would argue, a magnificent career for Ron Paul. And it's just very interesting that for a long time, Ron Paul has been kind of relegated to the dark corners of, the halls of power. And now it seems like he might finally get his day. So, hey, I am all for this auditing of the Fed. And that quote, Nico, of that article that you were highlighting is something we say all the time. The fact that the powers that be are no longer able to manipulate information, or rather manipulate the flow of information and or the flow of money, is why we're seeing so much political upheaval and so many hit pieces in the opposite, basically saying like these guys are bad. And actually, shouts out to Nolan this morning. There was an article, I forget what it was the other day, but it was a headline saying that if voters only knew what Trump was doing, it's something like the worst 2 weeks of a presidential history. If only they knew that Musk, or rather Trump, was here to minimize the power of the federal government, they would freak out. And it's like, wait, isn't that what this whole thing is about? We want to minimize the power the Fed has over Treasury. We want to minimize the power and the exertion of power that the Fed has around the world, because again, it's all going back to the central banks. Fix the money, fix the world. So hey, if we can audit the Fed, I'm all for this. I will be like a seal applauding it. But yeah, man, it's very interesting. I love to see this type of rhetoric being spewed out, and let's hope it actually happens. I love this narrative. This is great.
This is a crazy timeline, bro. Like, we could have never have imagined this. Orange man, orange coin, Ross is freed, potentially the Fed being audited, Doge finding all this fraud in the federal government. I mean, bro, like this timeline is crazy. And I think things are going to get even crazier from now because, again, think about how bumpy the disintermediation of information and state was, right? We kind of went through this process. We all went through this. Opti went through this. I went through this. It kind of happened like this. It was like, yeah, I mean, it's CNN. It's like Fox. Like, why would they lie to us? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then you went to like X or you went to YouTube or something like that. And then all of a sudden you started to notice like, wait a second, like they're not just getting this wrong. They're like saying the opposite of what is actually happening in reality. And all of society remember, some people are awoke a little bit earlier than you did. Some people are still asleep. Some people are still consuming that media. So it's like, but society is slowly going through this process of basically saying like, wait a second, like, the dude that is talking about eating elk and taking DMT is like way more accurate than the guy in the suit on TV on CNN. Like what is happening right now? So that same phenomenon, and it took like a decade, really, that same phenomenon is happening with money. And I think that's what people have to understand. Like it's happening with money and it's going to be a little bit of a shock. Like people are going to go and they're going to be like, this is crazy. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean the money's fake? What do you mean the money isn't backed by gold? You're in a cult. The people that are telling us in a cult, if you look at the back of a dollar bill, there's a freaking pyramid with an eye on it. Like, at least our cult, like, we get wealthier. Their cult, it's like, you get poorer over time by design. Except if you're in the government. Then you get the benefits of the money printer and the continuing effect. But everyone else, now you get poor. Like, at least our cult gets wealthier, bro. And we got memes. They don't got memes. Like, their memes suck. Like, a pyramid with an eye, that's a bad meme. I would give that meme a 1 out of 10. Anyways, guys, stay tuned for the culture segment. We still got a lot of content for you guys. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable energy. Also, gotta casually drop this in here, HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or check out their website, hivedigitaltech.com. I want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success.
Yo.
Dude, this new transitions and stuff. All right. Anyways, here we go with the culture. All right, so first up, guys, I don't know if you guys been watching the Mempools. Hopefully you have a node and you can see this on your own personal mempool. But as everyone's been talking about lately, a lot of the
wait, what?
Dude,
sorry,
Nico,
they changed the back end on Restream. I apologize.
All right. Anyways, as I was saying, if you've been watching the Mempools lately, they're clearing, and there was a lot of talk around Bitcoin Twitter that they would never clear again. And so I feel like it's my duty right now that the fees right now around Bitcoin are very low. If you look at your personal mempools in the morning, they're damn near clear, and you can get some transactions through with 1 sat fees. And so I've done this before, and there was a lot of talk for a while that you should be doing this, and people were saying the fees are too high. But right now is a good time for you guys to be consolidating some transactions. And so this is the first thing, as I say all the time. You know, if Bitcoin goes where we think it's going to go, you do not want to have a lot of small UTXOs or, you know, unconfirmed transactions, outputs, or basically, you know, if you're buying Bitcoin, if you're DCAing on some of these apps or, you know, exchanges, you might be buying $5, $10 of Bitcoin. They're hitting your personal storage, and you're thinking you're going to be good going into the future. Well, I would argue that you're probably not going to be. So you want to consolidate your transactions right now. It's literally as simple as just combining a bunch of your small Bitcoin, you know, UTXOs or what you consider coins, sending it to a new address to yourself, and consolidate into a bigger UTXOs. So there's a lot of debate whether what's a good size, but I would argue if you have, you know, 10 million sat UTXOs, you'll probably be good. But as we're seeing right now, the mempools are pretty empty right now. It's almost like a ghost town out there. So right now is a good time to look at your personal hygiene, UTXO hygiene, consolidate some Bitcoin, send it to yourself so that you have some bigger UTXOs if you plan to hodl long term. This morning, literally, it was 1 block. Now you're seeing that there is some transactions on the network. So it's very interesting that, like, in the early morning and at night, hardly anyone's using Bitcoin, and most people seem to be hodling, even though we're getting a lot of liquidity coming from these ETFs and stuff. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily blocking up the mempools out there, and it seems like all the other noise around Bitcoin has kind of left the building here. So right now is a good time to consolidate some UTXOs. We'll move it on. We'll keep it moving. So here's a good little video about this penny news. So let's play this little clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Some are paid to make pennies. Most Americans no longer want pennies, but government still makes them at a cost of 3 cents each. 3 cents to make 1 cent, losing taxpayers $100 million a year. That's government.
Okay, so if you guys haven't heard, and you know, many people can say their takes and what this story is a distraction from, but as you guys probably heard, Trump orders the U.S. to ditch the penny after decades of complaints. And then, of course, you guys heard that it takes 3 pennies to make 1 penny. And further along here, it even goes on to say advocates for ditching the penny cite its high production costs, currently almost 4 cents per penny, according to the U.S. Mint, and limited utility. Fans of the penny cites its usefulness in charity drives, etc., relative bargain and production costs compared to the nickel, which costs almost 14 cents to mint. So, you know, the angle usually here is this idea that there's just a lot of government waste, and get rid of the penny and, you know, like eliminate the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, or rather the federal government. And this is how we can get our country back on track, get our balance sheet back on track, and hopefully minimize our debt. But when I see this, man, I just think of this. I think of the $100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar here. And, you know, I know a lot of people probably on the right are like, this is so base, man. Let's get rid of the penny. No one likes pennies. I'm sure you guys don't care about your pennies. I certainly don't care about my pennies. If I get pennies, I'm like, doesn't matter to me. But when I hear this talk about eliminating the penny, yes, people can frame it as it's governmental waste. Yes, people can say, oh, this is a distraction for other stories. But all I'm hearing is, you know, the Trump administration, or rather the federal government, kind of capitulating to this idea that the currency is going into this hyperinflationary state. Like, that's what I'm hearing here.
I never saw it like that. That's so true.
Bro, that's all I'm hearing. Like, eliminate the penny? Like, cool. Okay. So, like, what? Are we going to get like $1,000 bill now? You know, $10,000 bill now? $500 bill now? Like, we're not going to have any change. So, you know, maybe this is just like the 45 IQ take on this. But when I heard eliminating the penny, all I heard was like, man, they're really capitulating to this idea that the currency is in a hyperinflationary state here. And considering now that Bitcoin is at 1% realized monetary inflation, it's just like the dichotomy here here is so crazy to me, where Bitcoin is becoming, and rather is literally the hardest money in the world. And, you know, it's deflationary, it's going up and to the right. And then we have all of this financial trickery to kind of show people that there is so much governmental waste, and that, hey, the dollar is still doing well, but like, let's just eliminate the penny. It costs too much money to make, and this is how we can eliminate some of this governmental waste. And I'm just thinking, like, man, it seems like we're capitulating to the fact that the fiat currencies are trash, and we might be hitting some form of hyperinflation in the world right now. And I'm like, geez, like, this is crazy right now. This is absolutely nuts. But hey, you know, things are moving quickly over here. Anyways, Nico, short bit. I think today is a short bit. We are kind of going long today. First of all, of course, keep an eye on the Mempools. In the early morning and in the evening, it might be a good idea to consolidate some UTXOs, because if we start to break into, you know, mid six figures, maybe people are still saying seven figures. You do not want to be caught on the sideline with a bunch of small UTXOs from your, you know, daily DCAs, 10, 5, even $100. Like, if that's all you have right now, that's cool, but you got to think about this stuff. There is some other things to think about in Bitcoin that you don't have to think about with your dollars, and you can just kind of think about it like if you're organizing your cash, you know, consolidate your UTXOs. But yeah, Nico, what's your thoughts on me thinking that when they eliminated the penny, I'm like, man, they're capitulating to hyperinflation. This is crazy.
Yeah, man. I mean, bro, they're just admitting to it. Like, and I never saw it that way. Then that's a great observation, Opti, because they're basically admitting that our money is going to shit. Like, because
exactly.
like that was the racket. The racket is like, no, this is the penny, and it's like, could you imagine, like, if you were a Bitcoin miner and it costs you more to mine Bitcoin than you were mining, right? Like, you'd literally go out of business. Like, the only way that Bitcoin miners are economical is if they mine more Bitcoin than they spend mining that Bitcoin. So with the government, like, and I'm so glad that you played that Stossel clip. It's like, yeah, it costs us 3 pennies to make 1 penny. That makes that's your brain on fiat. Like, that is fiat thinking. Like, fiat enables that. In no reality would that be viable or possible. The only reason that's viable or possible is because they have a money printer. If they didn't have that money printer, they wouldn't be able to do that. It would be unfeasible. It wouldn't make sense, right? So yeah, man, I'm so glad that you pointed that out. They're basically admitting their money is going to shit. They're admitting the system is broken 100%. But I think the good news, I think this is what's going to differentiate Simply Bitcoin from a lot of the content that you guys are going to be watching over the next couple of years. We actually have a comment from Han. He says, just get rid of the nickel too. It's 5 times as bad as the penny.
Oh, man.
That's hilarious. All right, everybody. Before we wrap up the show, I do want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, BitBlockBoom. Guys, we're going to be there this year. It's going to be absolutely incredible. You definitely don't want to miss it. It's April 3rd through the 6th of 2025. The tickets increase in 21 days, 18 hours, 56 minutes, and 14 seconds. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew is going to be there. You definitely don't want to miss one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year, Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th, 2025, BitBlockBoom. It's actually the first Bitcoin conference where me and Opti met each other in person. Simply Bitcoin would probably not be what it is today if it wasn't for this Bitcoin conference. I hope to see you guys in Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th of this year, BitBlockBoom 2025. Use promo code BBB21 to get $100 off your tickets. We hope to see you guys in Dallas, Texas this year, April 3rd through the 6th. Anyways, guys,
Hey, wait, Nico, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I did notice that we did miss a few super chats, so I do want to give them a shout out. I can't pull them all on the screen, but shouts out to Jordan Schultz sending us $5, and he goes, shouts out to my boy James, who skipped the shit coins and is Bitcoin only. Also, my mom, Judy, is 100% FBTC and MSTR retirement. Both of them are new listeners. Appreciate it, Jordan. And we got one more on Rumble. Shouts out to Zigzag, $2. And he goes, Holler, when can I get a super opti bitty bobblehead doll?
Ooh, we got to make it.
man.
We got to
I don't
make
know.
it.
I
We
don't
got to
know.
make it. Anyways, guys, that was Simply Bitcoin Live for February 11th, 2025. I'm your host, Nico. It's my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields. We're Simply Bitcoin. If you guys enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. But the number one thing you could do to help push the peaceful Bitcoin revolution is share this content. Get the message out there. It's not left versus right. It's not red versus blue. It's not liberal versus conservative. It's orange versus green. I think green. I just said, I think green. I think orange is going to win because incentives are better than coercion. All right. Love you all. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.